Hi, my name is Matt Desmarais. This is my final project for CSCI E90. This is my longer full presentation version. So starting off with my final project proposal here, I decided to focus on business intelligence and business analytics for the project. That's what I do for a job and been working with BI, business analytics, for the last 13 or 14 years now. So a lot of what I work with is SAP, so some more legacy systems. Recently been using ClickView, which is a little bit of a more modern tool, but I still see a lot of limitations with that. So I was really interested to see what AWS had to offer in this space. Just because everything we've used in class and kind of been exposed to so far has been fairly easy to use and just does a lot of the heavy lifting for you and lets you focus more on the smaller parts of the job that might actually give you more value. And with reporting, I struggle with just time and performance, just things taking a lot of effort to kind of push into the database and then struggling with all the time it takes to load millions and millions of records. So I really thought that Amazon would be able to help with that, and it seems to be a really good option. So I will start quickly with the basic architecture diagram that I have in my project proposal. High level, I just brought in some basic test data that I had put together, a million rows or so, in a CSV file. And I loaded that to an Amazon S3 bucket just as a place to stage the data and have it available. And from there, I chose to use Amazon Redshift, which is their data warehousing solution, Amazon's data warehousing solution. I had considered using data lakes in this, but I didn't get around to exploring those much. I found that going from S3 right to Redshift was pretty efficient, and I would like to look more into data lakes and what those provide as far as benefit down the road. But I decided to use a data warehouse to kind of have a landing point for my data to kind of combine and join it, because for my job, there's tons of different types of data from different data sources that I'd like to combine and be able to present in some end user reports. So I thought Redshift would be a good place to store the data and kind of use that as a data warehouse. And finally, as far as presenting the data, I went with Amazon's QuickSight tool, which is their data visualization tool. I found it to be fairly easy to use, pretty straightforward. I don't know how robust it is at this point. I did a proof of concept and brought some data into it. Was able to put together some quick dashboards, but I'm not sure as far as condition logic and distribution and things like that, how it might work. So I have to investigate that a little more. But I did get a good taste of it in this project. So to go into a little more depth, quickly, I'll just show my test data here of my starting point. Like I said, just like a million rows of sales data, sales document level with customer, material, quantity, amount at the end. Just basics to kind of get a feel for how this would work. I then converted that into a text file. I found that a little easier to work with. And then, it was delimited at that point with commas. So I brought that into an S3 bucket that I created called Final Project Desmarais Bucket, and then a sales data folder. Pretty straightforward up to this point. Was able to get that done pretty quickly. What took me probably the most time on the project and was a little bit tedious was getting the data from S3 into Redshift. So I came in here and created a new cluster and configured that with just default settings pretty much. I did have to create a security role for Redshift because I was having some issues just being able to load data and execute my queries. Once I gave that role read and write access with Redshift, it seemed to work fine. Mostly the issues I had were around my data, which had unacceptable characters like commas, ampersands, quotes, things like that throughout the data that gave me hiccups along the way. So in trying to load the data, when I would get errors, I eventually learned that there's a table that Redshift uses to store all the error history. So this STL underscore load underscore errors table is where all the errors go. So you have a log to kind of look at your errors and review them. So I wrote a quick query here that just returned that table contents, just the last 10 rows, in a format that was easy to read because initially it comes back and it's, you have to scroll through it all and that took a little while. So just as an example, I'll just show the query here. The last 10 errors I got with my data. So it was nice. It would show you the exact line in your CSV file where the data occurred. So I could just go to that line. It would tell me the column. So which field here. I had a lot in the customer sold to name field around accent marks and just different things that were in the data and caused issues. And I would often get this string contains invalid unsupported UTF characters. So once I worked through those, the data came in cleanly. A few times my initial setup on my sales table, which I'll show in 1 second, some of the fields I defined were too short. So I was kind of trying to fill a field in the table that didn't have enough space for my characters. So once I resolved all that, it was good to go. But that was kind of a tedious process with a million records. So I'll look into better solutions for that down the road. Back to my sales data. So I forgot to mention this when I first came into Redshift. This was basically how I was able to get the data into Redshift. First, you have to come in and create a quick query to actually establish the table that you're going to store your data in. So this is just a basic create table command. I called it sales data 8. It really started at sales data and then 2, 3, 4 different iterations until I got the field links and everything right. So basically you're just defining each field, giving it a field type and a character length. That creates the table. And then my other query was the basic copy command, which brings your data, in this case from my S3 bucket, into my sales data table residing in the Redshift cluster. AWS keys here, what delimiter you're using, in this case a comma, and just letting it know it's a CSV file. So, and this runs, it loaded the million records successfully in a minute or so, so it goes pretty fast. And then I had the data there in Redshift and ready to work with. So the final step was setting up the Amazon QuickSight tool. So this required a separate account setup, and it's linked to your AWS account, but it was a different setup initially when I logged in or when I came in to set this up. And when I did that, it prompted me to create my new cluster. It asked like what kind I wanted, and once I established all that, it was similar to this type of screen. So I named my data source, chose the type of instance, a database name, and then my username and password, which allows it to connect back to Redshift. So this is a specific data source to Redshift, which is the environment that I created my data warehouse in. Once I was able to get that set up, this is what your basic dashboard looks like. This was, really after playing for a pretty short amount of time. Just dragging and dropping the fields I was interested in showing into my window here, the pane I was working in, and just basics like customer sales by name, showing the top 2,500, and count of materials sold, total sales, US dollars. And, these are pretty straightforward. You can go in and just kind of add different visuals and then, drag and drop fields here, and you get a pretty quick response. You can add quantities and things, and then you have to go in and kind of configure the graphs so they make a little more sense. But overall, pretty quick to work with. And I found that, there's a lot of potential here to really turn around things quickly. I would like to look a little bit further into getting these types of reports to business users. What's the best way to distribute this out? Can you, attach these to a daily email? Do they come right into some kind of portal or interface where they can access this data? So those are some things I need to do some research on, so I can hopefully use this a little bit more in my job. And so that's really what I did for the project. It worked well. It was a little time consuming at points, but overall was pretty straightforward, and I'm happy with the results. So I look forward to learning a little more about it on my own time and kind of investigating it and see if it'll be a good, substitute for what I'm using now at work. So thanks for your time, and I enjoyed the class. Thank you.